Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. My name is Paul Maliri, and for 30 years I served with Essex Police. During that time, I interviewed suspects for murders, rapes, extortions and violent crimes. Now, I interview former members of the police and military and others who have done exceptional things in their lives. Sit back and listen to X Job Downloaded. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Maliri and this is X Job Downloaded, and today I'm going to interview Jackie Malton. Now, Jackie is a former member of the Metropolitan Police and was the inspiration for Lynda La Plantes' character Jane Tennison. She's moved into the world of script writing and advising, and she's currently, I think you're in a number of different things, including The Real Line of Duty. I think you've done that recently, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, to be absolutely correct, Paul, after Prime Suspect, I got loads of kind of phone calls from people, production companies, and wanted me to help them with police dramas. So over the years, when I was still in the job, I did most of the police dramas that you saw in the kind of 90s.
Fantastic.
It was a huge list of them, you know, Waking the Dead, Touching Frost, Ashes to Ashes, Trial and Retribution, all sorts of projects that I did. But the thing is, once you leave the job, after a period of time, you're way out of touch, out of touch.
Yeah, you absolutely
are.
So
that wouldn't be right for me to do that. And so I then have moved into documentaries, which, if I'll be honest with you, you know, I just much more prefer to do a documentary than to do the scripts. But I learned a lot from the process of scripts, and I had an amazing time. Don't get me wrong. It was great. But you are advising, if you like, story consultants, a team of script writers and script editors and the like, and they can take your advice or not. But the job really of a story consultant is to make the drama always comes first. That's what you have to remember. The drama is the most important. The procedural, police authenticity, etc., becomes secondary. But the job of a consultant like myself is to utilise that as part of the drama as well.
Fantastic.
So, in a sense, it's a bit of a limited role, whereas in true crime, you know, I'm sitting in the seat and I'm doing my research, and I'm working for a great company called Monster Films, who use me a lot for true crime stuff. And, you know, I understand what they want in terms of true crime documentary. And, you know, they changed my life in many, many ways. Lynda La Plantes changed my life, but as well, she was the first one to ever she gave me that voice. And, yeah, absolutely gave me that voice. But, you know, I do now as I've got older, I really like getting into cold cases to review them, to have a look at them.
Fantastic.
And, you know, I've just interviewed a serial killer, you know. How cool is that?
That's brilliant. Well, we'll come on to that. But where did it all begin for you, Jackie? What was your inspiration to join the police force?
Oh, right. Okay. So I was the youngest of three. My sister and my brother went to the top grammar schools in the city that we were living at this time, called Leicester, and I failed the 11 plus. So that was a huge issue around, because in the early 1960s, in terms of education, and women failing the 11 plus was like, you know, your options are kind of limited. So my favourite programmes on the TV were No Hiding Place, Dixon Dot Green, and for some reason, Paul, I don't know why, I don't know where this comes from, but I was always interested in crime and why people do the things that they do, etc. There was a neighbour of ours was a superintendent in Leicester Police at the time. Anyway, cut a very long story short, I joined the police in the Midlands in Leicestershire, and I joined as a cadet when I was 18.
Oh, may I ask what year that was then, please?
Well, I was a cadet in 1969.
Right, okay. So the world was completely different then, wasn't it? I mean, the policing world was completely different. Being a woman within the police service was completely different to what it is now. But what were your initial experiences like joining as a cadet in Leicestershire?
Well, as a cadet, I thought it was quite good because there was also a kind of social conscience that they kind of got us to develop. And I remember working in a home, a Leicestershire home for the disabled back then, and also doing the Duke of Edinburgh's awards, and also being a bit of doing all the kind of rubbish jobs, making the tea in the police as the cadet, not photocopying, but all the kind of what you call the kind of pony-old jobs. Yeah. I'll let the cadet do it. But it was kind of a mixture, and I really kind of did enjoy it. Lots of sport, lots of, good times. But I had a great leader called Inspector John Peacock, and there's just something about this man. He was very kind, he was very fair, he was very encouraging and supportive. And I'll never forget him. In fact, I'm still in touch with him on Facebook now. He's well into his 80s, but, he was encouraging. And so then I actually got sworn in on my birthday, 7th of July, 1970. I was 19 years of age when I got sworn in at Leicester Magistrates Court.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many women were actually in your squad when you went to training school? Because we still had the women's police service, didn't we, at that point?
Yeah, so that was all a bit of a shock. I don't know why it was such a shock, but it was a shock that women were kind of separate. I don't think I'd kind of, because you're a cadet and you're doing other things, you don't realise that actually when it comes to being sworn in as a police officer, you're in a separate department. Not only are you in a separate department in Leicester, you're in a different building. And Leicester, Charles Street Police Station was a very imposing building. Beautiful, I mean, huge. And right through the police yard and out the back and in another street and up some steps was this police women's department, which had its own hierarchy of a superintendent. She was blah, blah, blah. And it was just completely separate. So prior, obviously, to go to training, I went to Wrighton on Dunsmore training, which is ironically now as the police college. So we had a lady called Mary, and I still see her. She's from Surrey, and there was another girl, Pauline, from West Midlands Police. So I think there was the three of us was in my class, 460C training school. And we had, again, another fantastic sergeant who was our course leader. And, you had to learn definitions of robbery, theft, prohibited weapon, what a lethal barreled weapon was, Section 1 firearm, Road Traffic Act, and you had to learn these definitions off by heart. And you know what? I could still recite some of those definitions because it gave you, for example, the definition of robbery, that it was in your head. So you knew whenever you dealt with a potential robbery, was it a robbery? Because you'd learn, you kind of bring that definition to the front of your brain, so to speak. Yeah. So I again, the writing, they were very, very inclusive of women. There's no issues about being, a separate sex, so to speak. And, I had a really good time there, I have to say.
That's interesting. And I think that the definitions, the fact that we had to learn them, I joined a few years after you, but you had to learn them, but they stood you in good stead for everything that you dealt with. And it gave you confidence, certainly when you're taking your police exams, because you were part way there.
That's why, and I'll speak about this. That's why after my probation, 2 years probation, it was all in my head. I took my sergeant's exam straight after my probation. But I just want to go back to that training school. So we used to have, drill drill sessions every morning, dancing, marching to music and stuff. And the drill sergeant, I think he was from West Midlands actually, and he had like this slashed peak.
Yeah.
And he was very, very, very scary. He was the only one that was very scary. But I liked that drill. I liked marching. I loved the music. And, when he'd go and change, step, 1, 2, 3, change, step. And I used to love all that. And some poor people, I don't mean poor people, I felt sorry for them. They could not, they didn't have
coordination.
That movement. It took them ages to kind of get it. But, when you turn up and all these weeks later and you go to be passing out parade and you're marching like some top, military school, it's a great feeling. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it really is. And again, that's about teamwork, isn't it? Because you've got the whole squad there. You want everybody to march in the right time with the right steps, everybody going in the right way. And it's a great part of, I found it a great part of my police instruction. Yeah. And I still like the music now. I still smile when I listen to some of those marching bands.
Colonel Bogey and all that.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. So where did you get posted to on your first?
Oh, so I went to Leicester Central, which is the main, as I said, this iconic building. It's still beautiful today, but it's long gone, so to speak, unfortunately, long gone. So I went there, and again, the policeman's department was at the back of the building, and we had this separate hierarchy, etc. But one of the things that the policeman's department was absolutely brilliant at is they knew within Leicester Central it had an area called the Highfields, which was a lot of Afro-Caribbean people had moved into that area. There was quite a bit of vice going on, with what we called them prostitutes in those days. But obviously we call them sex workers today. And it was a very interesting area. Now, these policewomen knew, not just in the Highfields area, but in any around the estates that surrounded the city centre, which was part of our role and beyond, actually, that they knew all the families. We used to work with social services, which was different then because they would have independent social workers. So you'd have a mental health social worker, you'd have a children's officer, you'd have, a welfare officer. So they were all different. And we would work with these, what you would call the term social services, but they were experts in their own field. That was the difference. And that's a huge, huge difference when people are experts in mental health and the like. So as far as the records, card records, a bit like the old collator system with cards, we knew, I include myself, we knew all the sex workers, we knew the families, we would know the kids that were getting into trouble, and we were a really massive pool of intelligence, just in a way like the collators. But the difference being with the collators is that we were the actual people that were going out dealing with these families, bringing the intelligence back, filling in the cards, etc. So, they really did a good job. So the story against myself is, I didn't value it as a young 19-year-old at that time. I didn't value that work because I'm itching now to get up with the guys, because you're seen as secondary. You're seen as a secondary person type of thing. And then you would be called in. I always remember being called in. It's a funny story. Just being called in sometimes. I remember this story that being called in. I had to make, that was as a police cadet. So on any of the murders that we went in to, we would be office bound, et cetera, kind of doing that particular work. But it was interesting. But there was part of me that wanted to be kind of integrated within the team of the men.
Because talking about murders in those days, what people don't realise, people forget that computerisation around investigation is quite a modern technique.
It is.
It used to be card X's, and I don't know about in Leicestershire, but we had round tables, and everybody would be sorting through them, and it was But it was a system that worked. But, of course, Holmes came in and it pulled the jigsaw puzzle together or tighter. I think it took a lot of the free thought away because it became a system where it was churning out actions and people would do what they got by way of the actions rather than thinking laterally. But anyway, so what sorts of things would you deal with as a member of the Leicestershire Women's Police Department?
Oh, God, you're taking me back. Blimey. So a lot of them would be warrants. A lot of them would be missing persons, enquiries. You deal with women who had been arrested for crime. The guys would call you in for that. So, and on the downtimes, you would patrol. So I loved working the Highfields. And I'm a bit of a chatterer. So I would speak a lot to the sex workers back then. They were very good, and also about a missing person inquiry. And I remember, a couple of times that would be a missing girl run away from care home, usual kind of story. And they would say, come back in half an hour, Jackie, I'll have her with me. And then you go drive around, come back, half an hour later, that young girl would be. And I remember saying to them, this girl, why did you do that? And she said, because I don't want her to end up where I ended up, And in those days, being a sex worker, for example, was where two people committed an act together and only one person was guilty of it vis-a-vis the woman. So it was loitering or soliciting.
Yeah.
So with the sex workers as well, we used to kind of get our own little tea spots, and find out, just chat. And I used to kind of go and have a cup of tea with some of the sex workers in their home, and they'd say, oh, like it's Johnny's birthday next week, he'll be 2 or something. And I get little Johnny a present, little dinky toy or something.
Yeah.
And it was about chatting to them. And then they would inadvertently give me information, which was often about crime. So I had kind of what you would call informants, back then, informants. And I would happen to stop a lot of cars up in the Highfields that happened to have drugs in them.
Right.
So I was making a name for myself. And within 9 months service, they put me on the drug squad.
Wow.
Yeah. So in those days, it was drugs and vice. So I was put on that case. I put on that, for a year before my kind of 9 month service. That's all I had. But what I loved was about the communication, chatting to people, etc. And that was probably my best gift in a sense. And and I always remember, being non-judgmental. I'm very interested in them, very interested in their lives, and it was absolutely great, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the heart of community policing. And I know I can be hypercritical, and you're far more diplomatic than I am around this, but we need communities, and we need community policing within those communities. And whatever background the community is, we need to have the right people in there doing the right role. But
well, I'm mentoring. He asked me to be his mentor. I don't know how it was going to be working out, but it's a young gay officer. He's just got promoted now, but he's a young gay officer in the Soho, and he's just like that. He talks to people. He's a great communicator. And one of the things that I find ironic about it is that, and I've had this from an independent source actually, is that people are jealous of his communication skills, jealous that he gets letters of appreciation. And you kind of think, what do you mean? How can anybody be envious of a police officer that's doing their job when they're obviously not doing it? And he's a real credit. He has what I think, I'm sure people listen to these podcasts and they think, oh, what's these old kind of people talking about? They've been long gone. Stop being so boring. But he has professional curiosity.
Yeah.
And that I think makes the difference. He's able to talk to all sorts of communities, and he puts himself out for that, and he gets the benefit of it. But I'm surprised that people are jealous of his success, which they are.
But we've all, if you've been successful, Jackie, and you have been successful, there are always, they call them trolls now. There's always been professional jealousy. You will have somebody that you worked alongside who you think, oh yeah, they're okay. But there was you would suffer with, and I certainly did, professional jealousy, because if you were successful, if you had more nickings than anybody else, green eye sets in, and it's a terrible thing it's a trait within the police service. I'm sure it's everywhere, but I haven't worked anywhere else. I spent 30 years in the cops, so it's been there.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Yeah.
So what was the inspiration to move from Leicestershire to the Metropolitan Police? And what rank were you at that point?
Oh, yeah. So as I said, after my probation finished, I took the sergeant's exam and I passed it. And in those days, they advertised for sergeants in the separate policeman's department through Police Review,
right.
National magazine called Police Review. So I applied through Police Review to be a sergeant. And I remember people say, oh, it's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. She's got 3 years service in, etc. I remember the chief constable saying, well, I think you're a little bit too young to be a sergeant. You've got little service. And I said, no, I hear what you're saying. I said, but are you not the youngest chief constable in the country, Mr. Goodson? And he said, well, actually, I am. I said, well, there you go then. So anyway, he gave me the job. So I was then a sergeant within the policeman's department, and then the Sexual Discrimination Act came out. I always wanted to be a detective. So I was a detective sergeant. So the other thing was about the sexuality being different. My sexuality was troublesome for me because I had lots of shame about it. And you have to remember that this is early 1970s. And nobody was I did know gay people in the job, but they were all in the closet, because especially women are really scared to be out. And I do understand that. But the Metropolitan, so I played lots of sports. I played for the football team for Leicester City policemen's football team in the 70s. And I played hockey, and the Metropolitan Police hockey team came up, and we all got on all right. And there was obviously a few gay women in there. They said, "Come on, Jackie, come down the Met, much better. Leave this provincial force." So, so I'm jumping a bit. So at that point, this is 79, so I have 9 years service. So at this point, I've passed the inspector's exam, and I am now, so I've gone uniform sergeant, detective sergeant, and now I'm an acting inspector. It's a place called Hinckley in Leicestershire, which, I always say this, I have to apologise, but I just thought it was such I hated it. It was just a dump. I'm sorry for anybody who lives in Hinckley, but that's how I felt about it back then. So I was an acting inspector. So I went to see a chief superintendent who ended up chief constable of Leicestershire called Michael Hurst. And he was, I said to him, look, I've met these people from the Met, I don't know what to do. And he said, look, Jackie, they don't know what to do with you. I said, what do you mean they don't know what to do with me? And they said, they don't particularly want a substantive inspector woman. And in some ways, Leicestershire was ahead of the game in many ways. Mm. But some of the women within what we call the old policeman's department, now called the Special Enquiry Unit, had wanted to stay in that unit, had wanted to stay separated. So I think everybody thought it was a bit quirky. They couldn't quite pin me down on anything. And so he said, I don't quite know what to do with you. He said, if I were you, I'd go. So I transferred to the Metropolitan Police. I had to go as uniform sergeant. Now, the Metropolitan Police had their own inspector's exams, as you know, and so they would not accept the provincial qualification. So, but to be fair to them, they accepted me as a sergeant. They didn't even have to do that.
Right.
So they did that. I was a uniform sergeant. I had to retake the inspector's exam. And then quite quickly, within, let me think, I went to the Met in April 79, and by October the following year, 1980, I'm a detective sergeant. So it didn't take long. You know, you can't expect to go in and be a DS straight away. So it took that, however long that took, 18 months. And so I got in as detective sergeant in October 1980.
And where did you go as a DS?
I went to, there's a division called Tooting.
Yep, Fulham and Tooting out that way.
Yeah, I was Tooting, and they had a smaller substation called Earlsfield.
Right.
On Garrett Lane. So I went to Earlsfield. And at the weekends, you know, if you're on call, you cover Tooting and all of that. But I was only there 3 months. And there's a detective inspector. When you look back, you think, and he never came out of the office. He'd come from Scotland Yard on promotion. It was like he was so scared. He never went out. He never came out of the office. And it was a bit of a standing joke, really. But anyway, he was very nice, but I'm sure he was full of fear going as a DI, because it is a big step, DS to DI. I think.
It is, yeah.
And so he said to me, right, so he said, you need to report to Brockley Police Station, South East London. There's a fire, the New Cross fire, in January. So I went, I said, well, I don't even know. I lived in South West London. I said, I don't even know where Brockley is. Anyway, got my the wonderful A to Z, and found my way to Brockley, and then I never went back. To.
So you went on you worked on the New Cross fire.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That's still going on. There's still debate around the New Cross fire, isn't there? I mean, that's
well, there's debate from the black community about the New Cross fire. There is no debate from the police community.
No, absolutely.
It's been investigated about 3 times. They've always found the police enquiry investigation to be correct, to do the right thing. So the forensic evidence will show that the fire was started internally. Now, in fairness, and what I didn't know, because I'm a provincial officer, I'd come in and worked in South West London, was the fact that there was acrimony between the black community in South East London and the Metropolitan Police.
Yes.
And there had been some fires previously where it was seen to be a racist attack.
Yeah.
And that was kind of lumped together with this one. And they quickly formed the New Cross Massacre Committee, a very powerful group of activists.
Yes.
Who had this agenda that we hadn't investigated it properly, the usual kind of allegations. Now, I remember Graham Stockwell was the commander, and he said to us all, you will cross every T and you will dot every I 150%. You will give no room for criticism in the way that you have conducted yourself.
And absolutely right.
Absolutely right. In the way that you conduct yourself, and the way that, because there was allegations of a fight. And so it was a difficult investigation, because there were a lot of kids that were there who weren't supposed to be there, who hadn't told their parents. There were kind of difficulties establishing who was at the party and who wasn't at the party. Not everybody was honest about it. And you can understand all of these things. It's not a criticism. But it was difficult. And there was a fight. There was a fight between kind of some of the lads over girls, the usual thing. And the front parlour where the fire started was supposed to be out of bounds and locked. And there was allegations Mrs. Ruddock made that money and jewellery had been stolen. So there were lots of layers of complexity within the investigation. Now, Mrs. Ruddock had lost her son, Paul, and her daughter, Yvonne, whose birthday it was. she was 16. So, and there were 11 other victims. In fact, there was 14 victims altogether because one lad unfortunately killed himself. And it was a very sensitive investigation, very, very sensitive. And so I remember Mr. Stockwell saying that he'd been to the scene and, the bodies were in situ and everything. And he said it would be a scene that I will never, ever forget. To the day I die. And then there's another man called Joe Bell, who was a detective superintendent, lovely, lovely man. And there was a DI Henry, and I've just forgotten his surname now, who'll come back to me, but there was a DI, he was family liaison officer, and there was Joe Bell, and Joe Bell was a gentleman, so was Graham Stockwell, an absolute gentleman, very quiet, thoughtful, briefed us. We used to go for a briefing, 2 or 3 times a week. And we worked really hard. Yeah. Everyone worked really, really hard. I mean, I live southwest London, so I get to work at 8 and won't get home till midnight, up and go to bed, back again for 8, for months and months.
But we lived on the adrenaline of chasing down the suspect and making sure that the right job was done. And I do get really upset with some of the criticism that is levelled unnecessarily. Yes, I know that there have been inquiries that have been flawed, but I do get very despondent when people start criticising when they've never been part of a major investigation.
No, and I think the allegations that they make, that we wanted to find out who had committed, if there was a criminal act, was it a criminal act, was it an accident? We had to get to the bottom of this. Sad thing was that the coroner at the time called for an inquest in the April. So if you can just imagine that, so you've had January the 18th, 1981 to April. So it's 2 full months and, it's a couple of weeks either way. So within 3 months, he wants an inquest. And Mr. Stockwell went to see him and said, you can't possibly do this. And he said, I need to do this. I'm going to have the inquest to appease racial harmony, because there was lots of marches in London, if you probably don't remember, but there were, and protests and things like that. And Mr. Stockwell said, look, we haven't had time to investigate this. This is a complicated inquiry. We've got 13 young kids. They're dead.
Yeah.
I'd expect to have an inquest within 3 months. And, of course, he didn't take any notice. And what happened? It was an inquest, and what are you going to get? An open verdict. You're not going to get anything else than an open verdict. No. And it was all, again, I was very close to the Ruddock family because, again, it's probably, I wasn't saying I was a permanent family liaison officer, because I wasn't, because I was on the interviewing team as well. But I did have relationships with them, and good relationships with them. And then when we got to the inquest at County Hall, in London, I was completely blanked, and it is where, again, the activists, change the dynamics. They politicise it, which is, I found that kind of really, really sad, because the politicisation of the New Cross fire, takes away, who did it, the investigation. When I say it takes away, you know what I mean by that. Yeah. It interferes with it all, against just fighting accusations all the time. When what you're trying to do is go to work, do a job, find out who'd done it to the best of your ability. And we worked so hard, I can't tell you. I found it really sad about the accusations that were made, and still being made to this day, which I will defend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until my dying day. Yeah. We did our best to find out. And bear in mind, you don't have CCTV, you don't have social media, You're depending on, we had little forensic evidence, but we knew definitely the fire started inside the house, not outside the house. Nothing was thrown from outside into the house, which was what the activists were saying, but there was no evidence to show that. And anyway, it was a hard investigation, but you know what? I think I learned so much from that investigation and made me a better detective.
So did you stay on major investigations from that point onwards?
Yes, for a bit. Yeah. So then poor old Commander Stockwell, he's Commander Area 4. So this happened January the 18th. In April. So we're preparing for the inquest. He's obviously a main contributor to the investigation, to the inquest, is to giving evidence. Preparation is Commander Area 4, Brixton riots. Right,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So when they're preparing for the thing, for the inquest, we're taken, a few of us are taken off that team, and now we're in Brixton investigating the crimes that have occurred as a result of the riots.
Right.
So do that.
And that's a tough gig, isn't it? Because there was a lot of civil unrest at that time.
Oh, God, yeah.
And a lot of mistrust with the police. And at some points, you know, it was almost lawless in some places there. I don't know what it's like.
You can understand. It's not like I can't understand. You know, you can understand, you know, the kind of distrust of the police at that period in time, and, you know, the stop and search and all of those things. I do understand it, but it, you know, in terms of the Brixton riots and, you know, and the crimes that were committed and what's happened. So again, I'm on the investigation team for that. And then that takes you to July, when a little boy went missing, Royal Wedding Day, Vishal Malhotra. So I'd finished. We were all allocated a number of what you call crime files to do. I think I had 30, I think, at that point, you know, these preparing legal aids and stuff. And I'd finished mine at the point that Vishal Malhotra went missing. So I then was seconded to Putney Police Station, back to southwest London. And I was on the Vishal Malhotra investigation. There was a little boy went missing on Royal Wedding Day. He was 8, been to the royal wedding with his father, who was a solicitor. He was with the nanny, with his sister. The father got out of the tube. He went home. They just went to the shops. Vishal said, I don't need anything from the shops. Can I just walk home? He'd done that on a regular basis because he was at private school in Kensington. So the nanny saw him across the road and he was snatched by person or persons unknown, and he was found dead in Sussex in the February of 1982. So I'm on that investigation. I'm still in touch. It's a big thing for me. I'm still in touch with the family. I've been working with a BBC journalist called Colin Campbell and another detective, Sean Keep, working on who we consider are prime suspects for that. Right. Mainly that is the work of Colin Campbell, but there's been 3 of us that have been on this investigation. In fact, we just won 2 awards for the podcast, Visha. Oh. You were there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you were there at the True Crime.
Oh no, I didn't go. I wasn't there. No, I wasn't with Colin.
So you the Yvonne Fletcher, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yvonne Fletcher. Okay, yeah. So we can go on to that. So anyway, so I've remained in touch with the family since 1981. We've just done a podcast. It's called Vishal. If anybody's interested in listening to an excellent podcast, to say it's just won 2 awards at the True Crime in April this year. And we're pushing Sussex Police to reinvestigate it. We've had a meeting with them, a fantastic police and crime commissioner, Katie Bourne, who I found very open and helpful. I don't find Sussex Police particularly open or helpful at all. We've given the information nearly 1 year ago now. I find it appalling, absolutely appalling, about their lack of communication just with the family, really. And it's all. I think it's just in a too difficult trade, to be perfectly honest. So I understand about the pressures. I won't go on about Sussex that much anymore, but I'm not a big fan of them. And look at their detection rate. Burglary is just 5% detection rate, and you just kind of think, God dear.
But what do we know? We came from an era, as I say, I was slightly after you, but we came from an era where detection rates were buoyant. We dealt with things in good and if somebody came to us and said, "Do you know what, I've got an idea," they may have retired from the police service, but actually the ability to investigate never leaves you. It's still there. So why wouldn't your views be relevant? And I know Colin has the same issue with some other forces, Colin Sutton. It's just ridiculous.
I think it's pride, actually. I think it's absolute pride on their part. And it's just like, what are these kind of old retired cops doing? I found they have no energy. They had nothing that was saying, "Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks very much. We're definitely going to have a look at this." It's all weary. They're weary. They've got no energy. It's all, they've got so much else to do. And then you think that they're going to put a team on it from what they say. They put 2 people on it who, amongst other inquiries that they have to do, which are, current, pick it up when you've got a gap. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Scandalous. That's what it is.
I find it scandalous, but So from that, Vishal, I'm only on it for weeks and weeks, really, and I get a call, and we work again really, really hard on that, and I'm going to, again, it's been looked at about the Metropolitan Police response, and there is no criticism at all. In fact, somebody made a complaint, I think, and the Independent Office of, Police Conduct said that, that it was an excellent investigation. They had no criticism by the Metropolitan Police, because the Metropolitan Police, they did everything they possibly could. They got all the teams out, all the search teams, underwater dogs. I went up in a helicopter, everything. They threw everything at it. And again, of course, we had no CCTV, nothing, da-da-da. He's just literally snatched off the street. There's nothing planned about it. Some paedophile, unfortunately, was driving past. I think it was driving down Upper Richmond Road, saw the boy cross the road, saw it as an opportunity. I think there were 2 people there's 2 people that have got in that boy into the car. They've taken him down to Sussex. And again, the deposition site in Sussex is somewhere that the person would know that it exists. It's not something that is obvious to the eye. It's a place called Older Cops in Rogate. And it's on the side of and you've got to kind of jump over a fence, go across a field into a copse. You'd have to have local knowledge. You have to have local knowledge where that is. So we have identified a paedophile living not too far, who's a convicted paedophile, from the deposition site. Anyway, so I get called into the office. Who do you know in the flying squad? I said, I don't know anybody in the flying squad. Only Commander Stockwell, who by that time has moved from 4 area to Commander Flying Squad. And he asked for me. Wow. He asked for me. I think that's from New Crossfire and the Brixton Riots. And he said, there's no woman at Rotherhithe. I want a female officer at Rotherhithe, and I want Jackie Malton.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wow. And so there was a guy called Richard. He's a lovely guy. He's a detective sergeant, and sadly got Hodgkinson's disease and lymphoma, right. And he died later on. But he was absolutely lovely, and it was in what we had police orders.
Yeah.
And he said, "Here, Jackie." He said, "You're down to go to the flying squad." I said, "Correct." And he said, "I'm down to go to Croydon." He said, "But I've asked to go in the flying squad. They've got us mixed up." I said, "What do you mean they've got us mixed up?" He said, "No." He said, "They've obviously got us mixed up. The police orders got us mixed up. Like about you're going to Croydon." I said, "Croydon? You're having a laugh." So I said, good luck, mate. I'll try, Well done for trying. And that was it. We did have a bit of a laugh about it. But he was gutted because he'd applied for the flying squad and I'd done it. I hadn't even applied for it. And so on the first day, I have to give a trigger warning here because I'm going to swear, but it's part of the story. So the first day I go to Rotherhithe and my boss, a DI, very nice man called Stan Finch, he says, we'll meet your partner. I've arranged to meet him at like 12 o'clock in the pub called the Prince of Orange. I said, oh, okay then. So at 12 o'clock, this guy, it's a bit like John Wayne coming in, swing doors bash open and this bloke comes in. He's about 6'3". He's from Cheshire originally. He's got a bent nose and he's a detective sergeant and I'm a detective sergeant. And I said, oh, pleased to meet you, Phil. And he said, why don't you fuck off, you CUNT?
No way.
Yeah, he did. He said, why don't you fuck off, you cunt? He said, I'm not working with a woman, and stormed out. And he stormed out. So anyway, he was a nightmare. I said, oh, pleased to meet you too. So in what you had a squad car, like just on the Sweeney, you had a Granada, and you had, a team, and it was 2 DSs together. So he said to me, right, we're going to do a recce on a blagger this week, because I'm brand new, So I'm only this is September 81. I'd only kind of left the provincial force in 79. So within 2 years, I've done a lot.
Yeah.
But equally, I'm on the flying squad. I can't believe it. So I said, okay then. So I said, be you in the office at 6. I live southwest London. I said, yeah. So get up at 4, get to the office by 6. No show. He don't show up. Comes in at 9 with the driver called Yorkie. And I said, supposed to meet you at 6. He said, tough shit. He said, do it again Friday. So I turn up again Friday, to do the recce, no show. Now, I'd be here all day if I listed to you the kind of things that he did. My nickname was the Tart. He put me, always sit in the back, that's your place, Tart. He was a nightmare. And I lasted about 6 months with him. And I went to my boss, and eventually the other guys in the flying squad started to see, what he was doing. Yeah. And they weren't happy about it either, in fairness to them. And I said to my boss, look, I can't work with this idiot. I just can't work with him. So he gave me another partner after that, and it was fine.
That would never happen
Flying
today.
squad was big. Sorry?
That would never happen today.
No, it wouldn't happen today, no. It wouldn't happen today. My DI saying, oh, don't worry, I'll get used to it. I said, get used to it. I couldn't believe it. But you see, one of the things is this, right? One of the things, I'm a provincial officer, and also, like in the police, you've got a new officer coming, they all want to ring round, who is it? Or, she's a country bumpkin from the provincial force type of thing. She's gay, that type of stuff. And I used to get on the flying squad. I'll tell you a funny story, actually. But I used to get kind of, they used to have office lunches and stuff, and another office would cover. Yeah. So there was officers in the Met, so we would cover Barnes, saying they'd cover us, running armed robberies, and then you'd have this lunch. Oh my God! And I never really liked the taste of alcohol, to be perfectly honest. And but I wanted to belong, and I wanted to be part of them. So you're conflicted all the time about, you're conflicted because in a way, they don't really want a woman on the team because it just kind of, interferes in their world, if you like. And they always used to give me at these office lunches, everybody get a present, and I would just get, some like dildos or love balls or some sexual innuendo objects. And then one day, on one of these lunches, they got fed up with a flying squad driver. because they thought he was being a bit two-faced. So they'd gone to a butcher's shop in Bermondsey, and in those days used to hang the meat on a rack. Do you remember, on a hook in the window? And they bought one. It was a sheep, I think, lamb. Anyway, it was hanging. So they bought this whole lamb, and they got a carving knife and they stuck that in the back. And because he was being two-faced, and he said that was his present for the lunch. And I thought, thank God I got the dildo, to be perfectly honest. Oh. So, and it was hard. It was hard. It was, when I say it was hard, I loved the job. That was the point. I loved the job. I loved the people. You know, the flying squad was the top team if you wanted to be a detective. And not every detective wanted to be on the flying squad, because you give up your life for, 3 years. You give up your life. You can't say, oh, I might, I do a spinning class on a Tuesday if you can kind of, or I do Pilates on a Thursday. It's like you give up your life. And that's what I did. I was prepared to do that. Because you work long hours.
And there were proper armed robberies, weren't they? I mean, they were on the street, cash-in transits, and it was
transit,
It was a different type of criminal, and they were hard-nosed as well. The criminals that you were dealing with, they were hard-nosed people, but
it's ironic now, because I kind of work with ex-offenders now in my help offenders, not ex-offenders, help offenders in prison, but I keep in touch with ex-offenders, and I've done some presentations with a very famous armed robber called Noel Razor Smith.
Yeah.
And, we get on like a house on fire. And but it's just quite ironic, because he was infamous as an armed robber.
Yeah.
As an armed robber, and they were tough. They were tough.
They were tough.
Tough people.
They were tough. I met Linda Calvey a couple of years, and because she's
the Black Widow.
The Black Widow. And I actually really enjoy her company. She's really good company, and I've had a nice cup of tea and a slice of cake with her. But she's a very hard lady. But she was brought up in a hard world at that time. With the people that she was knocking about with.
Yeah.
But did they know you were gay at that point? Because they did. I mean, that's a brave step as well, because I've got friends who are gay, that, really difficult for them to come out because of the bullying that took place within the police stations, and and policing then was different, and people were vile.
Yes. Oh God, yes, they were absolutely vile. But I went with all of on the flying squad. I went with this sense of belonging. If they went drinking, I went drinking. I do exactly what they did. They played. They would play football, 5-a-side or 11-a-side football. I'd put myself in the team.
Yeah.
I just tried to integrate myself, and it was an era. I remember this detective sergeant, who wasn't on the flying squad, but he was a brilliant copper, called Ron Cork. And he said to me, Jackie, he said, you would never have survived if you just said, thanks very much, I'm going home. He just wouldn't have survived on it. So I went with, that's me. I chose to go with the flow, and I went with it. And, it was a tough gig, but you know what? It was one of the best jobs I've ever been on, and or best squads. Mm. And I remember going under the underpass in the Elephant and Castle and thinking, oh, do you know what? I do this for nothing. If they say to you, you're not getting paid for what you do, I'd say that's all right.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that. I understand that, because it is policing is a vocation and a passion, and if you've got that passion, you've got it.
So I'll just say this quickly. When we used to go to the Old Bailey, and you'd always have the same defence lawyers. So you'd have Michael Mansfield, Rock Tansey, Ronald Thwaites, invariably.
Yeah.
Now, if you didn't learn, and they'd ask for all your diaries that were done contemporaneously, they were always looking for an error in the diary, mismatched. So that what they would look for is an error in police procedure as opposed to the evidence. So the evidence was there. So let's find a fault in the system and then throw doubt into the jury. And we had one guy on an armed black, and we had information about conspiracy to rob in North London. It was Hilldrop Crescent we were parked up in. So the information was that they would come along, they'd transfer. The informant wasn't a flying squad informant. It was an informant of a DS on another, a divisional DS.
Yeah.
So we didn't have access to the informants as such. But the information was the car would turn up. There would be a second car parked up. They would walk from one car to the other, and then we had to keep. We didn't know. We knew that there was a security van route, but we didn't know where they were going to rob, so to speak. So they turn up and they move from one car to another. They had a tennis bag with tennis rackets sticking out, and the decision was to take them out because it was too dangerous to follow them in case you lost them in traffic and there was an armed robbery and somebody was killed. So there was enough to get them for conspiracy.
Right.
So bang, bang, bang. We videoed it. They had it all filmed. The bag went out of view for a second or so when there's a big, I'm in an OP, so I'm doing the running commentary on this particular job. We go back to the bloke's flat. He's already on the run, this guy, and that we proved that gun fired into the ceiling of the tiles. We took all the ceiling tiles down, went to the laboratory. The gun were recovered, did that to that. So we get to the Old Bailey, and they say we planted it. We planted it, and when the bag went out of sight, we planted it, and then we took that gun and we fired into the ceiling ourselves. Anyway, the jury believed it.
No.
The jury believed it, and so I couldn't believe it. He was not guilty, two of them. So I gave him one of them the property back. He said, "Oh, that was good, Jackie." He said, "That's a good result, isn't it?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I was going to plead guilty till the barrister said give it a run." He said, "See you later."
No. Unbelievable. But you did experience corruption, didn't you? You did witness corruption within the police service.
Yeah, no, I didn't on the flying squad.
No.
So no. I didn't witness any corruption on the flying squad. So what happens is I take the Metropolitan Police inspector's exam because the county one wasn't accepted, and I passed it, and I went to promoted as detective inspector from the flying squad to West End Central. Now, anybody who doesn't equate it with knowledge of West End Central, it's in Savile Row in the centre of the West End. Massive police station, very diverse. You've got Soho, you've got the markets, you've got Belgravia, you've got all the shops, Regent Street, Oxford Street. It's one of the busiest police stations in London. There are 4 detective inspectors. I'm the new girl on the block. I'm the only woman. The commander said to me, Ted Stowe, he calls me up and he said, "Well, we've never had a split-arse mechanic before. There's a DI." I quite like Ted Stowe because I was a bit cheeky to him. I gave him loads of cheek back. But I quite liked him. But he was very, very strict. And lots of people would come on aid from the outer divisions, R or S, and he'd come into the canteen. And if he saw anybody that was slightly scruffy, he'd say, "Tell your commander from this commander, the Premier Division, the Metropolitan Police, I'm not having a scruffy bugger like you in my police station. You're dismissed. Go back." And he was really, really, really tough. He'd come into the CID and he'd say, "Give me the crime books," and then he'd put big circles around them and all of this. He was a nightmare in some ways, but he was a decent cop, and everybody kind of quite scared of him. I was never scared of him personally because I think he quite liked me because I was a bit cheeky to him. Anyway, so unfortunately, Yvonne Fletcher was murdered, and I remember, on that day we all ran down to the scene at St James's Square. Ted Stowe was the Commander Gold, as we know it, etc., etc. And he told me later on when we went to the square, and it was terrible day. He was a man that all the colour had drained from his face. He was just could not believe that by then Yvonne Fletcher had died. Knew that she was dead. I saw all the hats in situ in the square. And so he said, go back to West End Central, Jackie. You know, this is going to be obviously a long job. It's SO 13, whatever they were called, C13.
Yeah.
It would be C13 job back then. Anyway, so there was a policewoman who's passed her exams. She's an acting sergeant. She's been put on a different relief as an acting sergeant because she was going to do her sergeant's course at Hendon, but they gave her a bit of experience. So she goes from her relief to D relief. And she says to me, she calls me at home one day. She said, "Are you on duty tomorrow?" "Yes." "Can I have a word with you?" "Yes." Comes in the next day. She said, "Look, I'm not really happy. I've just been put on this relief. And I don't like what's going on." I said, "Well, tell me more." So she said, "Well, there's lots of people been arrested for drugs, possession, but they're saying they're being planted." He said, "It's not like one or two. There's lots." Now, on night duty, there was a competition between all the reliefs who gets most prisoners. So she said, "I've been on a raid, drugs raid. Drugs were found. They were brought back, booked into what they call the Book 66. And she said, something isn't right." She said, "I came on duty the next day. The drugs had not been booked in to the Book 66. She couldn't book them in because she was just an acting sergeant. It had to be substantive." She said, "I've checked the warrant. It says no drugs found." Oh. So you've got prisoners alleging being planted. So drugs have gone missing in the sense, you have to stick with me for this, because they're going on raids, drugs aren't being reported, they're being used to plant on other people, and then they're renewing their stash, if you like.
Yeah.
With me. So what we only have got, so the drugs have gone, but we don't know, obviously, because they have not been tested at the laboratory, so what they are. So there's no continuity of evidence to say this was cannabis, da-da-da-da-da, or whatever it was. But you've also got 18 prisoners alleging planting.
Wow.
So what you had was, at its best, a theft of a plastic bag belonging to the Metropolitan Police.
Yep.
That's all you had. So, okay, because a long story short, what are you going to do about it, she said. I'm telling you, as a supervisor, what you're going to do about this. So I escalate it, and all hell breaks loose. CIB2 come down. He's suspended along with the sergeant and the PC, and it's a nightmare. The nightmare begins for us all because we're ostracised. Chief Superintendent calls me in and said, "You should have just come to me. I could have sorted this out. Mm-hmm. You're naive. As a new DI, you're naive," and this and that. So he alleges, this inspector, that he says, she's a lesbian. She's having an affair with this woman. I've had a bollocking with this acting sergeant. She's gone to this lesbian woman, DI. They've got their heads together and they have conspired a revenge story. That's what he alleged. So she gets human excreta smeared down her car door when she goes to her private car after work. I get the young probationer PC who's involved, poor lad. He eventually leaves the job. He can't stand the pressure, but he gets stuffed over at the section house when he gets back. And I get pornographic lesbian magazines through my door just before the trial at the Old Bailey. So we all give evidence, etc. So I walk into West End Central Police Station like the next day to get a cup of tea, and the uniform all stand up and walk out. And there's all graffiti around the station. It gets reported back to me in the men's toilet, "Is our DI Dyke?" And they weaponise the sexuality and stuff. On top of that, we don't have the CPS then, Paul. We have Solicitors Department.
Yeah.
So I can't remember. They make me officer in the case for 18 cases. So I have to do all the legal aids for the 18 allegations of being planted. So I do a report to the solicitor department. So drop every case. You must drop this because of the allegations being made. I'm suggesting you withdraw charges. And what do they say? No. They say no. We're going to carry this. So I have to keep going to all these Crown courts. And of course, each case is dismissed at each Crown court. Isn't it true that an inspector is suspended or even charged by this time? So, again, the defensiveness of the police, where you think, why don't you use your common sense? This is going to go pear-shaped. It's obvious it's going to go pear-shaped, but no, they didn't listen. So, anyway, eventually, so I get interviewed by the defence for some reason, saying what was my relationship, etc., etc. And I write this statement, or they write this statement out, and they send it to me. I mean, talk about being verbal by a defence solicitor. I couldn't believe it. I said, I'm not signing this. I'm not signing this. Anyway, so we did loads and loads of alterations, and they decided at the last knockings, when it's listed at the Old Bailey, I'm not going to be called. Anyway, he went to prison. And I went back I was at Western Central. I always remember it was in December. And this was 1985. This had happened in 1984. And this inspector said to me, I hope you're satisfied. So I said, about what? He said, well, I hope you're satisfied that he's been sent to prison. He's a man married with 4 children. That's you. He said. You did that. I said, well, actually, I didn't do that. He did it. But I remember the conflict, the isolation, the whole thing was just an absolute, nightmare to go through, nightmare. And the loneliness of it. Because in those days, if you're a whistleblower, so to speak, there was no support. There was 2 senior officers who were quite supportive of me, to be fair, and were very, nice and stuff. But nobody can appreciate. I mean, on my appraisal, they said, well, you would never have known that this officer was kind of experienced a difficult time internally and everything because you just got on with the work and da-da-da. But that's not how I felt inside, Paul. I was crippled inside.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, crippled. And we had some allegations I had another allegation about a homosexual commander that was using rent boys.
Right.
That's another story. Again, anyway. I had to do an internal to CIB2. It was around Operation, they called it Operation Meat Rack. And he actually had a heart attack and died.
Oh, crikey.
But there was lots of other evidence that came out later on in the public inquiries in the last 5 years about that particular individual. But, what do you do? It was like Western Central, it would attract, trouble.
But as you quite rightly say, you were in the heart of London. I mean, to put it into perspective, you're probably a 5-minute walk from St James's Square. It's
I was.
And then you're 5-minute walks from Bond Street, so you're right in the middle. And it's interesting. So, did you go on to a permanent major inquiry team, or
no, that was it. No, because we didn't have permanent major inquiry teams then. They didn't exist. So if there was a murder, there was you as a DI would be seconded. So what they had, each area within the Met had a major inquiry team, but that was very few officers. And if there was a major thing like a murder, then they would get all their staff from the divisions.
Right.
So if a murder happened, so I was on another fire investigation where 2 people died in Paddington, and then I got seconded to that as a deputy. A deputy SIO. So you would get seconded as so they didn't have, because now they're all murder squads, very, very polished professional homicide teams in the Metropolitan Police. I think they're excellent. They are absolutely excellent.
Oh, they are, yeah.
And they do them very, very well indeed.
And they're funded properly. I mean, I went on to the one in Essex in 2000, and that was the inception in Essex. We took the Met model, and money wasn't an object. You know, we had all the best gear, but we were successful, and that's what it did. It professionalised. I'm not saying it wasn't professional before, but it professionalised the way that it was, and technology and techniques had changed dramatically in such a short space of time. The advent of DNA, CCTV, and of course now we're looking at electronic devices from your smart. I don't want to say Alexa because it'll wake up in the corner, but you know, your Alexas, they're picking up information all the time, and these are the sorts of things that are seized. But how did Lynda La Plantes come into your life? Because I mean, that's a fascinating story in itself. So
we're going to jump a little bit now. Jump to a DCI now. I get Detective Chief Inspector, and I'm at Hammersmith Police Station, and there was a police officer that had left the job, and he got hold of Lynda. Somehow or another, they knew each other. And she wanted to write about a DCI in the Metropolitan Police who was female. Now, back in those days, there were 3 female DCIs in the Met. I was one of them. And this guy said, you need to speak to Jackie. So he called me. He said, could you speak to Lynda La Plantes about this story she wants to write? So I'd already helped the bill out quite a few times. So I said, yeah, okay. So I went to see her on my way home. She showed me the script. She said, I'll make you a bit of supper. You have a read of this script. What do you think? So I said, well, yeah, it's good, Lynda. I said, but, you know, this is not how policing works. This isn't how blah, blah, blah. And she said, would I help her? And I said, yes. So then I just used to go and see her quite a lot, often, very often, on my way home. And then I invited her to... I took her to the incident room at Barnes, the murder incident room there. Right. By then, the murder incident rooms had been formed,
yes, as
you just described. Took her there. I took her to postmortems. We took her to the divisional, obviously, CID. I let her speak to my team of detectives at Hammersmith, and we gave her. I took her to the Forensic Science Laboratory and introduced her to a couple of scientists there. So she had access, if you like. I spoke to the DPA's office. I said I was helping this writer called Lynda La Plantes, and they said, no, that's fine. So everything's above board. You know, we're all doing it, helping a writer out to get this done in a way that for her research. And then I'd tell her stories, so it'd be a little bit like going for therapy for me. Oh, and another thing, Lynda, and blah, 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 blah. And then she'd never taken notes. She never wrote anything down. She soaked it all up. And then the next time I read the script, it would be there and stuff, and that's how it developed. And then she said Helen Mirren was playing this part, and she invited Helen Mirren around. And then... we go into the production team, which is based in Manchester. So I got to take some days off annual leave. So I got to Manchester filming. And then the producers, a guy called Don Lever. So up until then, the team had been all women. The head of scripts at Granada TV was a woman. You know, then all the team were women.
Yeah.
So then they bring in a male director and a male producer called Don Lever. So he said, look, Jack, he said, somebody else has been shown this script, you know, a male detective or male police officer, and they say it's a load of old twaddle. And I said, well, you know, that's absolutely fine. I said, if you want to show this to 20 police officers, you'll get 20 different views. I said, this is my story. I'm one of 3 female DCIs in the job. Take it or leave it. It's up to you. And I remember him looking at me and saying, oh, okay, thank you very much. Now, I now know afterwards that Granada TV thought that they were really, really worried worried that it was going to bomb, that it would be hopeless, you know. And so Lynda La Plantes said, shall we make this character Tennison into a gay woman? I said, oh, no, don't do that, Lynda. Do not make her into a gay woman, because you're talking about 1991. I said, no, don't do that. Keep her as she is, straight, da-da-da. And then, you know, I go to BAFTA and all the press are there, and there's a preview of it. And all the press are wanting to interview different people and stuff, and then it hits the screens, and, you know, it's a bit like, well, it isn't a bit like, but it's one of those major programs, you know, like, you know, I'm an avid supporter of the post office scandal. I think it's absolutely a massive scandal, but the Mr. Bakes, you know, they got like millions of views. Prime Suspect got millions of views, got 18 million views. It's been seen by 78, no, I think it's 78, no, like 200 million views in 78 countries or something like that. It's unbelievably successful. And forever, my name is attached to that. And it's now like, when you think about it, 34, 35 years ago. Really,
but I think that's brilliant. You know, that's legacy for you, isn't it? That really is. And I absolutely adore Helen Mirren. That's another story. And she's an Essex girl. She's from she's from Leigh-on-Sea. So
from Leigh-on-Sea, yeah. And her nephew Simon, he's a writer now. Simon Mirren, he's a really, really nice guy. So yeah, and again, that changed my life. It changed my life. So for that, I am forever grateful to Lynda La Plantes, because on the first one is probably loosely based on a Yorkshire Ripper, and then the second one. So I said, because when you think about it, and these are the things that sometimes don't get picked up. Prime Suspect 1 is about a murder, but it has this misogynistic behaviour of the police. Now, I tell Lynda about Phil Williams, and she gets a character she puts in a character called Sergeant Otley on Prime Suspect 1. And Sergeant Otley is a right negative, played by Tom Bell. And that's Williams. Phil Williams is dead now, so it doesn't really matter. No. We based him on this Detective Sergeant Phil Williams.
Right.
So there was lots of that misogynistic behaviour in that. So the first one, misogyny. The second one is about race. And the third one is about child sex abuse and homosexuality. So it's very, very interesting, the first three, which, if you look at policing today, you know, all these years later, we're still concerned about misogynistic behaviour, race, and homophobia.
Yeah, we are. And I do think that diversity is better within the police service.
Of course it is, of course.
I think it is. I think they've still got a long way to go.
But it's a subject matter. I'm 100% with you about diversity, you know, but one of the things is the subject matter is still reoccurring when you read the Casey reports.
Yeah.
You know, that it's there. And I, you know, interestingly enough, I've been out of the job many, many years, but of late I've been asked to talk to a number of the teams in the Met, TSG, Brian's Wood, County Lines. I've been to Staffordshire Police, I've been to Wiltshire Police, you know, talking about culture, critical loyalty, bystander effect. And I talk about these subjects within my own story so that they can identify, because some of the stories against myself. And, but, you know, bystander effect is very, very, you know, important, that we can turn loyalty around to critical loyalty in a way that is positive and culture change. So I don't invite myself, Paul. These police forces invite me in.
That's very good.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, but the bystander, it's funny because Bob Sherwood, who I'm actually out with on Sunday evening, we're going...
But going to Bob Sherwood. Bob Sherwood was one of the best loyal officers I've ever worked with. He was Detective Sergeant when I was a DCI at Hammersmith. He's remained loyal and a good friend to me for years and years and years. I absolutely adore him. He's a proper, what you call, solid, good investigator and stuff. And then when he left the police, you know, I love him to death. And when he left, and his family, when he left the police, I've just been to one of his events, actually, at the Imperial War Museum when he did a presentation on the work that he's done as Dr. Bob Sherwood.
Yeah.
Dr. Bob Sherwood for the work that he's done on the war crimes.
He's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal and captivating. Like you know, and I'm blessed with the participants on my podcast because I get so many brilliant people. You've got a public life, and some of them haven't, and they've got that opportunity to deliver on. And Dr. Bob Sherwood is one of them because he is absolutely brilliant.
I took him to the BAFTA preview of Prime Suspect.
He told me, and he was absolutely overwhelmed. You know, that's a memory that sits with him forever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How long did you eventually serve in the police service?
So what happened was this. So I was 1969. So I went for superintendent twice, detective superintendent twice. So I did an assessment centre twice. I passed them all. They had marks out of 5. You look at all my grades, I get 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5. And I do a psychometric maths test and I fail it. I go again, do the same thing, assessment centre. Everybody's supporting me, you know, everyone's supporting me. Commander, the whole lot. Do another psychometric maths test, failed the maths. So I'm out. So I then get an injury on duty, which is a knee injury. I had to have a knee replacement later on. So I then went to see the CMO, and he said, and by this time I'd had enough. I just about had enough. And he gave me the option. I said, you know what, I've had enough. And this time it was about the government focusing on arrests, on arrests by the police. And so you got to this ridiculous, as DCI had to sign them off.
Yeah.
Ridiculous one, somebody be done for a spliff with a mate or 2 mates or something, and they'd start being arrested for possession with intent to supply with a spliff and other different things. You know, I'm very strict, but I'm also very fair. And I wasn't having this. I said, this is just absolutely ridiculous. So for example, there would be rape investigations on one particular one, so we knew where the suspect lived, so we put the uniform officers. I have great relationships with uniformed officers, and the CID was seen, I made them as support to the uniform. Yep. So it was equal. Never had any of that nonsense about CID and uniform, not at all. With the troops, you know, my dad taught me to walk the floor every day. He ran newspapers, and I went in, I walked the floor every day before I did anything else, spoke to everyone. And I had a good relationship with the uniformed officers. And then, so we put a uniform officer on the door for the rapist to come back, then to get the nick. So we'd be working for days and days. And in statistics, we got nothing. No, in terms of reflection about the CID. Yeah. So the arrest would go to the uniformed officer because he'd arrested them, you know. And so this was absolutely ridiculous. So the CMO said to me, actually, I think I'll let you go. And I said, thank you very much. And I went.
After how many years?
So I went in 1997.
Right.
28. So I did 20. If you count the cadet, I did 28.
I mean, that's a long time. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. That's a long time ago, isn't it? 1998. Now, it's
it's a ridiculously long time ago. It's a ridiculous long time ago, but you know, I've been around crime for a long, long time now. So I volunteer in a men's prison. I've been in a men's prison for 18 and a half years now. I help men with addiction issues. I had PTSD after West End Central. I had a problem with, you know, I was kind of thinking, I don't even like myself. At that point. So I chose not to drink anymore. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was in the job in 1992. The job didn't know that. I went there and I've remained ever since. So I haven't had a drink for 31 years.
Wow.
I went to university. I did an MSc in addiction psychology and trained counsellor. So I think, how do you give that back? So I understand about crime and I understand about criminals. And so I've been in a prison every week, every Wednesday, for 18.5 years now. And I absolutely love it. And I support lifers. So a week ago, last Saturday, we did a presentation to a load of young chief executives on HMS Belfast. These young chief executives come from all over Asia, and they wanted me to moderate a panel. So I had three of my, including Noel Razor-Smith, who I didn't meet in prison, but the other two I met in prison, who have really worked hard on rehabilitation of themselves. So I moderated their journey of crime and their journey of rehabilitation. So one had killed his partner, the other one was another domestic violence incident, and Noel Razor-Smith was a robber. And these CEOs were saying, unbelievable about themselves as individuals, about the search for money and wealth, but actually, in terms of their own emotional intelligence, some felt lacking.
Yeah, and I can understand that, because we didn't join the police service to be wealthy. We joined it to, and I absolutely mean this, to make the difference and try and help the people. I come from a police family. That's my thing. But it does. I can understand a CEO sitting there, because it's all driven around figures and money, and that's what there are. And then you meet these individuals who have crossed the line when it comes to criminality, and you can see why they do feel slightly inadequate.
No, it's very, very powerful, absolutely very powerful. So they want to keep in touch with a couple of them and myself. So the whole thing is about carrying on, being professionally curious about all aspects of life, and about developing oneself. And the other thing is, most people don't want to look at the shadow aspects of themselves because it's too difficult. They don't like it, put it in a box, or I'm not prepared to go there. But you're never complete as a human being if you don't look at the shadow side of self. And in prison, it's a real privilege, because I facilitate that process of them looking at the shadow side of themselves. And somehow it works, that even though that you're an ex-cop in recovery oneself, that the combination, and gay, I think that helps, that combination all helps in listening and being not judgmental. I'm never judgmental, but you listen. And for many of them, Paul, it's the first time that somebody has ever listened to them in their life. Yeah.
I get it. I mean, it's about giving them opportunity to break the cycle, because if you look at if Brixton, there'll be kids there that would make fantastic police officers, but they're never given the opportunity. They don't want to break the cycle because they see that it's a weakness, or their friends will start bullying them, and it's so sad. I think it's really sad around the knife crime issue in London at the moment. I think it's really sad. Dare I say it, with the mayor? I don't think he's very supportive of the Metropolitan Police and the aims and objectives of society there. Full stop. Because you can't make an omelette without cracking eggs. And the fact is that if they don't start doing the stop and search, and there's an irony, because this week chief constables have come out and said that they're supporting stop and search, but if they don't stop and search kids, they're going to have more fatal stabbings.
Yeah, well, the guy from Westminster, the guy from Greater Manchester,
yes.
Mr. Watson, he's had a successful kind of, turnaround. The police, you can't respond to everything. It all becomes diluted, and then you lose priority. And once police officers stop turning up for burglaries, that was like a downhill spiral. That's not their fault. That's led by, police leaders or managers or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to think about what your priorities are. And the priorities are often about street crime, robberies, burglaries, which affect people kind of individually. It's very intrusive crime, burglaries. Knife crime is everybody sees what's going on, and then you've got quite an oppressive IOPC, And then the culture of the police saying, you know, this job, we're not getting supported by government, we're not getting supported by the Lord Mayor of London, we're not getting supported by some of our police leaders, you know, if you just read the Casey report says the front line are not supported.
Not supported.
And, you know, and, you know, and they're your most important officers.
Well, but they are, and I've said this before, every crime, irrespective of what the crime is, commences in the community. Now, it may be a community in, I don't know, in some part of Africa where they're committing frauds, but it then infiltrates the communities here. And it's all about a community liaison and the effect that by withdrawing police officers from the front line, closing the police stations, that's had a significant impact on us as society. What was the highlight? I mean, Lynda La Plantes has got to be up there when it comes to the highlight, but were there other highlights that you can reflect on?
Well, I love the job. That's the point. I love meeting people, dealing with people. I find the whole thing fascinating. If you get, you know, good results for your investigations, whether that be, you know, blackmail or armed robbery or whatever, you know, rapes, investigations, all of that is something that actually you feel good about. Feel good that you've done a good job for the victims. So anything that is around doing the best thing that you can for victims, I found was, you know, the highlight. I think you get asked loads of times, don't you, about a highlight. I've been involved in the period of time in London. I was on the Harrods bombing. When I was on the flying squad, we all got attached to the Harrods bombing. You know, Yvonne Fletcher murder, the New Cross fire, the Brixton riots, Vishal Malhotra. They're high-profile investigations in a period of time in London that I happened to be on all of those investigations. And then you go to Hammersmith as a DCI. We set up the second domestic violence unit in the whole of the Met. So there was the first one in North London, Tottenham, and the second one was the one that I created, you know, in Hammersmith. And we worked with Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and we did partnership. We did male offender programs in parallel to the females that were complaining that they'd been assaulted. So we did those. We did. You know, I was on loads of committees. I was on a committee for Rent Boys called Streetwise. I was on an HIV committee. I was on Women in Prison committee in North London. There's loads of things where you try and work together as teams.
Yeah. One
of the things that has changed in the police for the better is about partnership working. It's about listening to other partnerships working in a similar area to what the police work in. And the thing is that when you first started in the police, they always wanted to be in charge. They wanted to run the show, and they would set the agenda. And one of the greatest things is actually to change that.
Yes.
And say, you be an equal member sitting around the table, and you're not going to run it. And this whole thing about, you know, there's still obviously been criticised lately about, you know, the kind of denial of stuff. You have to be, the police service, much more open and transparent. You don't have to, you know, and working with others. You're not special and different, the police service. But what happens is that the police service in the culture, I think, and people can say, oh, it's not the same anymore. But, you know, you're not operating in a bubble.
No, they're not.
Operating in a bubble. And I think the police, when I was in it, they thought that they operated in a bubble. And if you lose the trust of the public, you've had it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've absolutely had it.
Absolutely.
So the biggest job, I think, you see, for these poor police officers, you've got no police station. There is no police station to go to. There's no canteens. No. They're eating on the run. They're eating from fast food, you know, places and stuff. There is no place. There's no route for them to have a base.
No.
There's no local intelligence officer. There's all of that made it your home. Like Hammersmith was my home. I loved Hammersmith. And in a way, I loved Western Central. And I loved the flying squad. and that was my home and my base, and I had my little space to go to and sit down and a desk and all of that, and that's all gone, isn't it? It's all gone.
Yeah, it has, and that was my sanctuary. I had a desk, and that was the big. When I went on CID and got my own desk, I was made up. I didn't want anything else then.
Exactly.
And I had everything there, my creature comforts, and I really do genuinely feel for. The trouble is, Jackie, and you see it on social media, I see it on social media, people moaning about it. If it's that dire, then they've got to get out. Because it's making them unwell. If it's that bad in the police service, they need to go and go and get something else, because there are jobs out there, but it's still a great job. It's still a great job.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of both, actually. I think there's like people like Brick Cop on Twitter. Oh, he's just phenomenal. I'd love to meet Brick Cop.
Yeah.
And the great work that, he does and stuff, and the positivity. And there's quite a few people, like Caroline from the City of London, We Cops Caroline. There are many, many people on Twitter that are very absolutely positive and trying to kind of, keep up that beat and change it and everything else. There's some brilliant people. There's some very courageous. I don't mean there are some. There are thousands of many hardworking, courageous officers who are absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. There are.
It's the government, unfortunately, that are unsupportive. It's the media that does the main damage to policing. Absolute terrible damage to policing when you read some of the headlines and the comments or listen to the radio and stuff. And what, in a way, I'd love is the old kind of, we used to have Director of Public Affairs, DPAs, whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
Start fighting back. This is the reality of policing London. This is what happened on this incident.
Yeah.
But sometimes the Metropolitan Police, they don't fight back enough for me. They just let it happen. We're responding to headlines, and everything else. But you just say, look, this is the reality of what it's like policing in London.
Well, and when you joined, it was different to when I joined. But the types of crimes that you dealt with in 1969, they've doubled today because of the online element, the vulnerability agenda.
To be honest, they're probably quadruple. That's why I'm saying you can't respond to everything. What are the policing priorities? I mean, they have got rid of. When I say if they've got rid of mental health, I mean I think that was a great decision to make. To not deal with the mental health issues. Because they just can't do it, because you're tied up for hours and hours and hours in a hospital and you're waiting for sections and everything else. But there has to be some form of, and I'm sure there is, in terms of, priorities. But then we have freedom of speech, so you've got public order, marches, protests every week. You haven't got like one. It's week in, week out, where you've got like 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
Happening at the same time.
And those officers that are doing the public order patrols have to come from somewhere. They're not all on a TSG. They're on boroughs, which means that they're not working with their local communities. Their workload increases. Nobody's dealing with the thefts, burglaries, assaults that are in their trays, because they're policing a public order march in central London. And it's just, this isn't what the London wants. There's 30-odd thousand coppers. There's not enough of them. But, of course, closure of the police stations, as we've alluded to, that hasn't helped, because we're now moving people all over London in order to get to work. But, we could talk about that for hours. Jackie, before I conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to add, alter or correct in relation to the statement that you've made today?
No, I don't think so. I just like to thank, those police officers that are working out there in London and elsewhere. I think they do a phenomenal job. I think they're they're constantly criticised. And in spite of that, they get up every day and they, as John Sutherland says, they go towards when most people walk away.
Yeah.
They walk towards danger, go towards danger. And they're absolutely, phenomenal. So I take my hats off to them. I have huge respect for the police service today. And it's all of the rest of the lot that, as I said before, I think the media are a disgrace regarding policing. By all means, report stories, but do it in context and in fairness, not just what they call, is it clickbaiting and headlines.
Well, that's...
I have to say, for me, it was a privilege to be a police officer. I wouldn't have changed anything, not one day, not 1 second of my job, because it's made me the person that I am today. And you know what? I'm very, very happy with myself as an individual, and I've had a great life.
Very quickly, on your books, I mean, you are a published author. What was that like the first time you walked into Waterstones and saw your name on the cover?
Well, the first thing was the kind of the book launch was absolutely fantastic, and then just to see your book, it's a really, really nice feeling. I did it with a ghostwriter. I'm glad that I did because she was absolutely brilliant, and we worked well together. And I am very, very proud of that book. I've been asked over the years to do a book, and I thought, no, I'm not ready for it. But as I've got older, I thought, you know what? Yeah, the story will be left for, police history to ponder over, 50 years' time or something.
Absolutely. And I have one final question. What do you think your parents would say now?
Oh, oh dear. I think they'd be very proud. I think they would be very, very proud.
Yeah, I think they would be as well, Jack. And you're an absolute star. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's funny, isn't it, how our worlds have crossed, and then obviously you were there to support John Murray with the Yvonne Fletcher work that he's doing. He's just a phenomenal man. And you see these people, don't you, that John Murray promised Yvonne Fletcher that he would do that, and that's what he's done for the last 40 years. It's a huge personal cost. And you get these individuals like John Murray and others that have a belief in something and they don't let it go. I just think it's fantastic.
Commendable.
There's some fantastic people.
Yeah, there are.
Out there doing things. And again, like your podcast and stuff, you're getting people's voices out there, aren't you?
Yeah, and like you say, it's preserved forever, because whatever happens, this is going to be, the internet will evolve to something else, and in 100 years' time, someone will be listening to it, and happy days, So, but listen, thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you for seeing me so late on a Friday. Thank you so much for your time, Jackie, and I'll speak to you soon.
Speak soon. Bye, darling.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks ever so much for listening to this episode of Paul Mulleary's X-Job Downloaded. Please like, follow, and share with all your friends. Your support is absolutely invaluable and makes a real difference to me as a podcaster. Thank you.